The sound came from the far end of the library, not footsteps, not wind. A page turning. I froze between the shelves, breath held, fingers numb inside my coat pockets. The library was supposed to be empty after midnight. The old town rules were clear about that. Winter nights closed things early. Even the heater had been shut off hours ago. Another page turned. Slow. Deliberate. The overhead lights flickered once, then steadied. The shadows between the shelves stretched unnaturally long, like they were listening too. "Hello," I said, hating how small my voice sounded. Silence. Then a whisper. Not a word. Just breath. Close enough to fog the air. I turned too fast and knocked a book from the shelf. It hit the floor with a dull thud, the sound swallowed by the thick carpet. My heart hammered as I crouched to pick it up. The book was already open. Its pages were yellowed, handwritten in tight, uneven script. I didn't recognize the language until I did. It was English. Just old. Wrong. The first line read, "You should not be reading this at night." The temperature dropped sharply. My breath came out in clouds now. Behind me something shifted, slow, patient. Another whisper brushed my ear. Too late. The lights went out. The lights came back, but the darkness did not leave. They hummed softly above me, those long yellowed fluorescent tubes, casting the same tired glow they always had. Yet the library no longer felt illuminated. Shadows clung to the corners of shelves, thicker than before, like soot that refused to be wiped away. The silence pressed in, heavy and deliberate, as if the building were holding its breath. I stood alone in the central aisle, heart pounding, staring down at the book lying open at my feet. I didn't remember dropping it. I didn't remember bending down. That realization slid into my chest and stayed there, cold and sharp. The clock above the circulation desk read 12:17 a.m. Its second hand was frozen mid-tick. I watched it for far too long, waiting for it to move, to prove time was still behaving normally. It never did. Outside the tall front windows, snow fell sideways, scraping against the glass like fingernails. Greyhaven winters were always cruel, but this felt intentional, like the night itself had chosen not to let anyone leave. I picked up the book. The cover was unmarked, the leather cracked and warm against my palms, as if it had absorbed someone else's body heat. The pages whispered faintly as they shifted, settling on a passage I hadn't turned to. "You always come back here." My throat tightened. "This is stupid," I muttered, though my voice sounded distant to my own ears. "Just stress. Lack of sleep." That was the lie I reached for first. I had come back to Greyhaven 2 weeks earlier, dragging a suitcase full of clothes and disappointment. The city hadn't worked out. The job hadn't worked out. Life had quietly shut a door in my face, and I had pretended not to notice until the cold forced me home. The library had been my escape as a kid. After my mother died, it was the only place where no one asked questions. Warmth without conversation. Silence without judgment. Stories that didn't demand anything from me. Until now. The air smelled wrong, like old paper soaked in winter air. I took a step back, then another, suddenly aware of how far I stood from the exit. The shelves seemed taller than I remembered, their tops vanishing into shadow. Rows stretched deeper than they should have, bending subtly, like a corridor in a dream. A faint sound drifted through the stacks. Not footsteps. Breathing. I turned sharply. "Hello," I called out. The word barely traveled before dying in the carpet. For a moment nothing happened. Then a chair scraped softly somewhere to my left. Slow. Careful. The sound of someone who did not want to be rushed. I followed it to one of the long oak reading tables. A woman sat there now, thin and pale, hands folded neatly in front of her. She wore a faded gray cardigan and wire-framed glasses that belonged to another decade. Her eyes were sunken but alert, fixed on me with unsettling familiarity. "You shouldn't stand between the shelves like that," she said. "That's how people get lost." My stomach dropped. "I didn't hear you come in," I said. She smiled faintly. "No one ever does." I noticed then that her breath did not fog the air. Do you work here? I asked. I used to, she replied. Her gaze flicked briefly to the book in my hands, and something like pity crossed her face. So did the others. The others. I echoed. She leaned closer, lowering her voice as if the shelves themselves were eavesdropping. The ones who stayed too long. A chill ran through me. Look, if this is some kind of prank. Don't, she interrupted softly. Don't pretend this is normal. That's how it wins time. The word win settled uncomfortably in my thoughts. What is this place? I asked. Her expression tightened. It's a library. That's not what I meant. Silence stretched between us. The lights flickered once, twice, then steadied again. Somewhere far off, a book slid from a shelf and hit the floor with a dull final sound. Finally, she spoke. It keeps stories, she said. Not the kind you check out. I looked down at the book again. The text had changed. This is where you realize you should have left. My pulse thundered in my ears. I want to go home, I said, and hated how desperate it sounded. The woman's smile returned, thinner now. So did I. The lights dimmed suddenly, plunging half the library into shadow. The shelves shifted, not dramatically, just enough to be wrong. The exit sign flickered, its arrow pointing nowhere. The woman stood. If you hear whispering, she said calmly, don't answer. And whatever you do. A voice rose from deep within the stacks, layered and slow, speaking my name with perfect familiarity. She stopped mid-sentence. Her face drained of what little color it had. Oh, she whispered. It's already started. The book in my hands grew heavier. And somewhere in the darkness, something turned a page. Not to read, but to continue. After the whisper spoke my name, the library did not erupt into chaos. That was the worst part. Nothing rushed at me. Nothing screamed. The shelves didn't collapse, and the lights did not go out. Instead, everything settled, like a predator lowering itself into the snow, patient, certain. The woman at the table straightened her cardigan with trembling fingers. You didn't answer, she said, almost approving. That's good. What was that? I asked. She hesitated, then said, a reader. The word made my stomach twist. That didn't sound like a person. It used to be. The whisper came again, softer now, drifting from somewhere behind the history section. My name stretched unnaturally, syllables bending as if the voice was learning how to shape it. I backed away until my shoulders brushed the shelves. A book pressed against my spine, warm through my coat. The woman gestured toward the reading table. Sit. Don't wander. It notices wandering. I didn't like how calmly she said that. As I sat, the library seemed to expand. Rows lengthened. Corners deepened. The far walls faded into a gray blur, as though distance itself had grown tired of being measured. She folded her hands again. You're going to hear things tonight. Stories. Warnings. Lies that sound like comfort. Why me? I asked. Her eyes flicked to the frozen clock. It's winter. And you came back. That answer felt incomplete, but pressing her felt dangerous. The book in front of me opened on its own. This time, the story was not written in first person. The entry described a caretaker named Ellis Rowe, hired during the winter of 1973 when a blizzard sealed Greyhaven off from the highway for 11 days. The library became a shelter then. Warmth, light, quiet. People gathered. Stories were shared. On the 5th night, Ellis began hearing whispers between the shelves. On the 7th, he found books returned that no one remembered borrowing. On the 9th, he discovered a ledger in the basement. Records of names, dates, and brief, unfinished stories. Ellis tried to leave on the 10th night. The storm would not let him. The final line read, he realized too late that the library had been built to remember what the town wanted to forget. The page went blank. I looked up. Is this real? The woman nodded. Ellis was my predecessor. You worked here after him? Yes. And before you. She swallowed. Others. A sound echoed nearby. Soft. Rhythmic. Footsteps. They were slow, deliberate, moving parallel to us on the other side of the shelves. Not approaching. Not retreating. Matching our stillness. "Don't look," she whispered. "I didn't move," I whispered back. "Good. It prefers to be noticed." The footsteps stopped. Something exhaled. Then silence again. The woman leaned closer. "You need to understand something. The stories don't live in the books." "Then where do they live?" Her eyes lifted, meeting mine. "In us." Hours, or something like hours, passed. The clock never moved, but my body felt the drag of time. Cold crept deeper into my fingers. My thoughts grew sluggish, like they were wading through snow. The book continued to open itself. Each story was worse. A teenage girl who hid in the library during a winter blackout and found herself unable to leave. A father who read aloud to keep warm and realized the words were no longer the ones on the page. A woman who tore pages out to stop the whispers and was later found with her tongue shredded, as if something had punished her for stealing language. Between stories, the library reacted. A book slid from a shelf when I thought about leaving. A chair shifted when my attention wandered. The whisper returned whenever I stopped reading. The woman, she eventually told me her name was Margaret, watched all of it with hollow resignation. "You're doing well," she said once. "That's not comforting," I replied. "It's not meant to be." At some point, I noticed something worse. The stories were changing. Details sharpened. Locations grew familiar. Street names I knew. Memories I hadn't thought about in years bled into the margins. My childhood visits, my mother's handwriting in old book covers, the winter I spent sleeping between shelves because going home felt emptier than staying. I slammed the book shut. The whisper returned immediately, louder now. "Daniel." I covered my ears. Margaret's voice cut through sharply. "Open it." "I won't." "You must." "Why?" Her voice dropped. "Because it's already writing you." The book grew heavier in my hands, like it resented being denied. When I opened it again, the heading made my vision blur. "The Reader Who Came Back." The first paragraph described my arrival at the library with perfect accuracy. I stood so fast my chair tipped backward. "No," I said. "That's not possible." Margaret did not look surprised. "It always does this eventually," she said. "The library doesn't invent. It remembers. Then stop it." Her laugh was bitter. "If I could stop it, do you think I'd still be here? Why didn't you finish your story?" I demanded. Her eyes darkened. "I tried." That was all she said. The whispers multiplied as the night deepened. Not all of them spoke words. Some hummed. Some breathed. Some simply stood close enough that I could feel a presence without sound. Figures appeared at the edges of my vision. Never clear, never complete. Faces blurred like smudged ink. Bodies half-formed from shadow and memory. Once I thought I recognized a man from town. Another time a child I used to go to school with. "Are they real?" I asked. Margaret stared at the floor. They were. The library began rearranging itself more aggressively then. Aisles that should have led to the exit curved back into the reading room. Signs pointed in contradictory directions. The children's section stretched impossibly far, its cheerful murals peeling into something darker the deeper they went. I tried to mark my path with books pulled halfway from shelves. When I looked back, they were perfectly aligned again. The basement stairs appeared where they hadn't been before. I stared at them, heart pounding. Margaret noticed. "Don't," she said. "Why is that here now?" "Because you're close." "Close to what?" She hesitated. "Understanding." The whisper answered before she could. "Completion." Eventually, Margaret told me the full legend. Not all at once. The library didn't like that. Grey Haven had been built during a long winter famine. People starved quietly, ashamed. When spring came, no one wanted to speak of the things they had done to survive. The library was erected as a monument, not to knowledge, but to forgetting. Stories were sealed away, names recorded, truth buried in ink and paper. But winters returned, and the library learned to keep what it was fed. "It needs readers," Margaret said softly. "Living minds, warm memories, cold nights. And once it starts writing you?" I asked. Her voice barely carried. "It doesn't stop." The whisper grew louder after that, no longer pretending patience. "Read. Remember. Stay." I felt my thoughts slipping, memories replaying out of order, moments blending with the stories. I could no longer tell which fears were mine and which had been planted. The book opened to another blank page. Ink began to form. Margaret stood abruptly. "No." The shelves groaned in response. "I won't let it finish you," she said, though her voice shook. "How?" I asked. She met my gaze, and for the first time, I saw something other than resignation. Defiance. "We go to the basement," she said. "Where it keeps the ledger." The whisper screamed my name. The stairs creaked open wider. And somewhere deep below, something turned a page. Not slowly this time. Hungry. The basement stairs yawned before us, impossibly long, carved from shadows and dust. The air smelled of decay, cold metal, and paper so old it hurt to inhale. Each step I took echoed as if I were descending into another world. Not another floor, another dimension, folded inside the library's winter grip. Margaret's hand found mine. I flinched, expecting her to be weightless, ethereal, like the others. But she was solid. Warm. Human. For a heartbeat, I almost believed this was still possible. Escape, reason, morning light. Then the ledger appeared. It was enormous, bound in something that gleamed like flesh under the dim, flickering lights. Leather, stitched too tightly, veins pressed into the cover as if it pulsed with a heartbeat. The whispering was deafening now, surrounding us. Not words, sounds of scratching pens, turning pages, low breaths, groans of memory being pulled from all who had ever come here. "This is it," Margaret whispered. "The ledger keeps everything it's fed. Names, stories, people. It chooses, and it doesn't forget." I swallowed, my throat tight. "Why me? You read. You remembered. Now you're part of it." Her voice shook, barely audible over the whispers. "You can't stop what's already begun." I tried to step backward. The walls stretched, elongating, bending the stairwell into something that no longer obeyed geometry. Every step I took brought me closer but also deeper. I wasn't moving forward. I was folding inward, into the library itself. The whispers became voices. Layers of them, overlapping, each calling my name, repeating memories I didn't know I had, twisting them, mocking me. I heard my mother's voice. "Come back, Daniel. Don't leave me here." And my own. "I'm not afraid. But that last part was cut off. My words were stolen, reformed into sentences I didn't intend. The ledger opened before us. Pages flipped violently, though no wind stirred. Names and dates swirled, forming paragraphs that knew me intimately. My handwriting, my thoughts, my deepest fears recorded as if I had written them myself. I screamed, but the sound was absorbed, swallowed by the whispering. Margaret gripped my wrist. "Don't resist too violently," she said. "It feeds on struggle. Fear is expected. Panic is nourishment." I wanted to hit it, burn it, destroy it. Nothing worked. My hands passed through the ledger like air, but the weight of it sank into my chest anyway. Every name etched into it throbbed with life. I realized it had been writing me even as I had read. Every decision, every doubt, every memory of the cold nights back home, every fear of returning. It was all here. And it wanted me to join. From the shadows, a figure emerged. The librarian. Tall, faceless, limbs too long, moving like a puppet whose strings were pulled from the ceiling. Its presence warped the basement further. Desks stretched, the floor buckled, walls bent in impossible angles. It didn't speak. Its voice was the room itself, a low hum of inevitability. Margaret hissed. "It wants to finish you." I stumbled backward. The ledger's pages flipped faster, as if hungry. I recognized a sentence forming before my eyes. Daniel Mercer comes to read, and now Daniel Mercer stays. I threw myself at the ledger. My hands passed through the cover. My chest burned. My mind screamed. Time bent. Seconds became hours. Hours became eternity. The librarian moved closer. The shelves around us no longer resembled anything familiar. The basement spiraled upward, downward, sideways, folding over itself. I could see my reflection in the polished wood of the desk, distorted, elongated, fading. I was becoming part of the architecture, part of the shadows, part of the ledger. "Stop!" I shouted. "I won't." The whispers drowned me. They became hundreds of voices, repeating my failures, my guilt, my loneliness. Each syllable was a blade. Each word was ice against my skin. Margaret lunged forward, holding a candle she had produced from somewhere, its flame impossibly small but bright. The librarian recoiled slightly. "Daniel," she shouted, "focus on the story. Focus on yourself. Don't let it overwrite." I clutched the ledger with both hands. The names and words seared into my mind. I saw myself from the outside, a figure suspended in time, screaming silently as the library consumed me. Every memory I held, my mother's death, my childhood winter walks, the smell of the library carpets, was being written over. I was disappearing word by word. I tried to think. Anything. Anything from the past that was mine alone. The smell of hot cocoa after snowstorms. My dog barking in the yard. The quiet hum of the city before sunrise. Clutching those memories, I forced them into my mind center, shouting silently against the librarian's encroaching reality. The ledger pulsed. The shadows recoiled, briefly. Then the librarian stepped forward. Its faceless head tilted as if inspecting a puzzle. My heart hammered against my ribs. If it saw doubt, it would consume it. "You cannot leave," it whispered, not with a mouth, but through the air, through the floor, through the fibers of the building. "Winter keeps what it touches." The words struck me harder than any blade. I realized then, I had already been touched. The library had waited decades. It had known my return was inevitable. The whispers, the books, the shadows, they had all prepared me. I was not entering the ledger. I had always been there. Margaret screamed my name. I turned, and for a moment I saw her clearly. Fear etched into her hollow eyes, tears freezing along her cheeks. She reached for me, but the librarian's shadow surged forward, separating us. The ledger's pages flipped faster, faster. Names, words, memories, swallowing space, reality, light. The whispers became screams. My own voice joined them, repeating things I hadn't yet done. The past, present, and future collided. I tried to scream, tried to fight, tried to rip myself away. But it was futile. The ledger was no longer a book. It was a machine of inevitability. My body, my mind, my very identity folded into its pages. The last thing I saw was Margaret, frozen in place, candle held aloft, whispering something I could no longer hear. The librarian stood beside her, faceless, patient. Then the pages closed. The whispers stopped. Silence. The library was empty again. But I wasn't gone. Somewhere, deep in the shadowed stacks, a page turned. Slowly, patiently, a new line appeared in the ledger. Daniel Mercer came to read. Daniel Mercer stays. And elsewhere a whisper traveled. Next reader come. Winter waits. The library was quiet the next morning. Too quiet. Snow had stopped. The streets glimmered under the pale light of a winter sun. Footprints in the parking lot were fresh, mine presumably. But the library's doors were open, as if inviting anyone to enter. Yet no one came. Greyhaven's residents whispered that the library was cursed, a place best avoided after dark. They didn't mention me. They didn't know. Inside, everything seemed normal. The books were neatly shelved, the desks polished, the air carrying that faint, familiar smell of old paper and winter frost. It was the same library I had known as a child, or so it appeared. But I knew better. I had seen the ledger, felt the librarian, touched the shadow of inevitability. I sat at one of the long oak tables, staring at the circulation desk. My coat was still damp from snow, my hands cold, my mind numb. Margaret was gone. The whispers were gone. Yet the weight lingered, like a stone pressed into my chest. I picked up a book at random. The pages were blank. A shiver ran through me. The book on the returns desk caught my eye. Its cover was unmarked, leather cracked and warm. I didn't remember placing it there. And I hadn't. I opened it. The first line formed immediately, in handwriting I recognized all too well. If you are reading this at night, it's already too late. I dropped the book. The sound echoed too long in the empty library. A cold draft brushed my ear, and I heard it, a faint, familiar whisper. Daniel. I froze. My breath fogged the air. The library smelled of snow, paper, and something else I couldn't name. Decay and memory, both entangled. I tried to convince myself it was imagination, that the night, the winter, and my own fear had conjured the sensation. But deep down I knew the truth. The library had not released me. Some part of me, the part it had touched, memorized and rewritten, remained within its walls. Perhaps the ledger kept that part alive, a fragment of self folded into its pages. Perhaps I had never really left. I walked through the aisles. Everything was orderly, familiar. Yet each shelf seemed to lean in slightly, as if listening. Each book seemed to watch. I felt their eyes, ink and paper sharp enough to pierce the soul. The circulation desk had a card waiting, a simple note handwritten in an uneven, ancient script. The reader returns. I recognized my handwriting. I dropped the card. It fluttered to the floor like a dying leaf. Outside, the wind moaned through the empty streets. I pressed my hand against the window. Snow had fallen overnight, erasing footprints, erasing evidence of passage. The world looked peaceful. Inside, nothing had changed. Yet everything had. I tried to speak, to call for help. My voice sounded strange, too low, too hollow. It echoed back at me from the walls, distorted. A whisper followed me from the stacks. Stay. I ran through the library. Doors opened into the same room I had just left. Windows showed endless snow, falling upward. The aisles curved into themselves. The familiar became alien. I stopped in the children's section. Murals of bright winter scenes peeled slowly, revealing darkness beneath. A figure moved in the shadows, small, thin, unformed. It mimicked me, my gestures, my steps. I blinked. It vanished. I realized I was no longer alone. Not entirely. Every reader who had been touched, every story swallowed, every whisper obeyed the same law. Winter keeps what it touches. The library was patient. It waited for nights like this, long, cold, silent, when curiosity returned to its doors. I sank into a chair. The daylight offered no comfort. Outside, the town seemed alive. Inside, a quiet terror thrummed in the air. The book I had first opened lay on the table again. Its pages shifted slightly, as if stirred by unseen fingers. I dared not touch it. Yet I could not stop looking. I understood now. I would carry this library with me. In dreams, in reflections, in memory. I would hear its whispers when the wind cut through my home. I would feel its presence in the silence between snowfalls. Part of me would always be folded into the ledger, ink and shadow, unread but remembered. A single page turned somewhere deep in the stacks. Slow, patient. I froze. It was not my hand. It had never been my hand. A soft exhale of air passed my ear. A whisper carried through centuries of winter nights. Next reader, come. Winter waits. I left the library. My coat was damp, my hands frozen. My heart hammered. The sun glinted off the snow, but I could not see it. My vision was clouded with shadow, the residue of something older, colder, and patient. Behind me, the doors of the library swayed gently in the breeze. No one entered. No one ever would, or at least not willingly. The streets of Grey Haven seemed alive again, But I knew the truth. The library waits. Always waits. I would never speak of this. No one would believe me. And even if they did, would they survive the telling? I walked through the snow, feeling the library's presence fold around me. It was part of my shadow now. Part of my memory. Part of me. And somewhere behind its walls, deep in the stacks, the ledger waited, ready for the next reader, the next winter night, the next inevitable return. The final page turned itself. Silence. And then a faint, inevitable whisper. Daniel. I flinched. I ran. But I knew, winter keeps what it touches. And I had been touched forever. The town was quiet. The snow gleamed. But I could never forget. The library remembers. Always.